Rhode Island, officially the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, is a state in the New England region of the United States. Rhode Island is the smallest in area, the eighth least populous, and the second most densely populated of the 50 U.S. states. Its official name is also the longest of any state in the Union. Rhode Island is bordered by Connecticut to the west, Massachusetts to the north and east, and the Atlantic Ocean to the south. Rhode Island was the first of the original 13 colonies to declare independence from British rule, declaring itself independent on May 4, 1776. 2 months before any other colony. It was also the last of the 13 original colonies to ratify the United States Constitution. Rhode Island's official nickname is the Ocean State, a reference to the state's geography. Since Rhode Island has several large bays and inlets that amount to about 14% of its total area, its land area is 1,045 square miles, but its total area is significantly larger. Origin of the name. Despite its name, most of Rhode Island is located on the mainland of the United States. The official name of the state is State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, which is derived from the merger of two colonies. Rhode Island Colony was founded on what is now commonly called Aquidneck Island, the largest of several islands in Narragansett Bay, and included the settlements of Newport and Portsmouth. Providence Plantations was the name of the colony founded by Roger Williams in the area now known as the City of Providence. It is unclear how Aquidneck Island came to be known as Rhode Island, although there are two popular theories. Explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano in 1524 noted the presence of an island near the mouth of Narragansett Bay, which he likened to the island of Rhodes. Subsequent European explorers were unable to precisely identify the island that Verrazzano had named. The Pilgrims who later colonized the area assumed that Verrazzano's Rhodes was Aquidneck. Giovanni da Verrazzano named a place on Rhode Island Punta Miovianum in honor of his friend Paolo Giovio, humanist and historian. Giovio owned the Codex Cellar of Giovanni da Verrazzano, containing the text of his first trip. A second theory concerns the fact that Adrian Block passed by Aquidneck during his expeditions in the 1610. Described in a 1625 account of his travels as an island of reddish appearance. Historians have theorized that this reddish appearance resulted from either red autumn foliage or red clay on portions of the shore. The earliest documented use of the name of Rhode Island for Aquidneck was in 1637, by Roger Williams. The name was officially applied to the island in 1644 with these words: Aquidneck shall be henceforth called the Isle of Rhodes or Rhode Island. The name Isle of Rhodes is found used in a legal document as late as 1646. Dutch maps as late as 1659 call the island Red Island. Williams was a theologian forced out of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Seeking religious and political tolerance, he and others founded Providence Plantations as a free proprietary colony. Providence referred to the divine providence and plantations referred to an English term for a colony. State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations is the longest official name of any state in the Union. 2009 contestation of the name in recent years. The presence of the word plantation in the state's name became a sufficiently contested issue that on June 25, 2009, the General Assembly voted to hold a general referendum determining whether Providence Plantations would be dropped from the official name. Advocates for excising plantation asserted that the word specifically referred to the British colonial practice of establishing settlements which disenfranchised native people, and symbolized for many Rhode Islanders a legacy not only of violent native disenfranchisement but also of leadership in the establishment and proliferation of slavery in the colonies and in the post-colonial United States. Advocates for retaining the name argued that plantation was simply an archaic English synonym for colony and bore no relation to slavery. The referendum election was held on November 2, 2010, and the people voted overwhelmingly to retain the entire original name. Geography. Rhode Island covers an area of 1,214 square miles and is bordered on the north and east by Massachusetts, on the west by Connecticut, and on the south by Rhode Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean. It shares a narrow maritime border with New York State between Block Island and Long Island. The mean elevation of the state is 200 feet. It is only 37 miles wide and 48 miles long, yet the state has a tidal shoreline on Narragansett Bay and the Atlantic Ocean of 384 miles. Nicknamed the Ocean State, Rhode Island has a number of oceanfront beaches. It is mostly flat with no real mountains, and the state's highest natural point is Jerry Moth Hill, 812 feet above sea level. Located within the New England region, Rhode Island has two distinct natural regions. Eastern Rhode Island contains the lowlands of the Narragansett Bay, while western Rhode Island forms part of the New England upland. Rhode Island's forests are part of the northeastern coastal forests ecoregion. Narragansett Bay is a major feature of the state's topography. Within the bay, there are over 30 islands. The largest is Aquidneck Island, shared by the municipalities of Newport, Middletown, and Portsmouth. The second largest island is Conanicut. The third largest is Prudence. Block Island lies about 12 miles off the southern coast of the mainland and separates Block Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean proper. Map of Rhode Island, showing major cities and roads. Shoreline in Newport, Rhode Island. Ninigret Pond National Wildlife Refuge, Rhode Island. Geology. A rare type of rock called cumberlandite, found only in Rhode Island, is the state rock. There were initially two known deposits of the mineral, but since it is an ore of iron, one of the deposits was extensively mined for its ferrous content. The state is underlain by the Avalon Terrana and was once part of the microcontinent Avalonia prior to closure of the Iapetus Ocean. Climate. Rhode Island is on the borderline between humid subtropical and humid continental climates with warm, rainy summers and chilly winters. The highest temperature recorded in Rhode Island was 104 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded on August 2, 1975, in Providence. The lowest recorded temperature in Rhode Island was -23 degrees Fahrenheit, on February 5, 1996, in Greene. Monthly average temperatures range from a high of 83 degrees Fahrenheit to a low of 20 degrees Fahrenheit. History. Colonial era. 1636 to 1770. In 1636, Roger Williams, after being banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony for his religious views, settled at the tip of Narragansett Bay, on land granted to him by the Narragansett and Pequot tribes. Both tribes were subservient to the Wampanoag tribe led by Massasoit. He called the site Providence, having a sense of God's merciful providence unto me in my distress. Eventually it became a place of religious freedom. In 1638, after conferring with Williams and Hutchinson, William Coddington, John Clark, Philip Sherman, and other religious dissenters settled on Aquidneck Island, which was purchased from the local natives, who called it Pocasset. This settlement was called Portsmouth and was governed by the Portsmouth Compact. The southern part of the island became the separate settlement of Newport after disagreements among the founders. Samuel Gorton purchased the Native American lands at Shawomet in 1642, precipitating a military dispute with the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In 1644, Providence, Portsmouth, and Newport united for their common independence as the colony of Rhode Island and Providence plantations, governed by an elected council and president. Gorton received a separate charter for his settlement in 1648, which he named Warwick after his patron. During King Philip's War, a force of Massachusetts Connecticut and Plymouth militia under General Josiah Winslow invaded and destroyed the fortified Narragansett Indian village in the Great Swamp in what is now South Kingstown, Rhode Island, on December 19, 1675. The Indians referred to this as a massacre. The Wampanoag tribe under war leader Metacomet, whom the colonists called King Philip, invaded and burned down several of the towns in the area, including Providence, which was attacked twice. In one of the final actions of the war, Benjamin Church killed King Philip in what is now Bristol, Rhode Island. King Philip's head was put on a pole and stood at the entrance to Plymouth Plantation as a warning to other Indians for years. The colony was amalgamated into the Dominion of New England in 1686. As King James II attempted to enforce royal authority over the autonomous colonies in British North America. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688, the colony regained its independence under the Royal Charter. Slaves were introduced at this time, although there is no record of any law legalizing slaveholding, although the colony later prospered under the slave trade, by distilling rum to sell in Africa as part of a profitable triangular trade in slaves and sugar with the Caribbean. Revolutionary to Civil War period, 1770–1860. Rhode Island's tradition of independence and dissent gave it a prominent role in the American Revolution. At approximately 2 a.m. on June 10, 1772, a band of Providence residents attacked, and subsequently burned to the waterline, the grounded revenue schooner Gaspee for enforcing unpopular trade regulations within Narragansett Bay. Rhode Island was the first of the 13 colonies to renounce its allegiance to the British Crown, on May 4, 1776. It was also the last colony of the 13 colonies to ratify the United States Constitution on May 29, 1790. Once assurances were made that a Bill of Rights would become part of the Constitution. During the Revolution, the British occupied Newport. A combined Franco-American force fought to drive them off Aquidneck Island. Portsmouth was the site of the first African-American military unit, the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, to fight for the U.S. in the Battle of Rhode Island of August 29, 1778. The arrival of a French fleet forced the British to scuttle their own ships, rather than surrender them to the French. The celebrated March to Yorktown, Virginia in 1781 that ended with the defeat of the British at the Siege of Yorktown and the Battle of the Chesapeake began in Newport, Rhode Island under the joint command of General George Washington, who led American troops, and the Comte de Rochambeau, who led French soldiers sent by King Louis XVI. In 2009, this was officially recognized by the National Park Service. Rhode Island was heavily involved in the slave trade during the post-Revolution era. In 1774, the slave population of Rhode Island was 6.3%, nearly twice as high as any other New England colony. In the years after the Revolution, Rhode Island merchants controlled between 60% and 90% of the American trade of African slaves. In addition to the slave trade, Rhode Island was also heavily involved in the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in America in 1787 when Thomas Summers reproduced textile machine plans he imported from England. He helped to produce the Beverly Cotton Manufactory, which Moses Brown of Providence took an interest in. Teaming up with Samuel Slater, Moses Brown helped to create the second cotton mill in America, a water-powered textile mill. As the Industrial Revolution moved large numbers of workers into the cities, a permanently landless, and therefore voteless, class developed. By 1829, 60% of the state's free white males were ineligible to vote. After several unsuccessful attempts to address this problem, a new state constitution was passed in 1843 allowing landless white men to vote if they could pay a $1 poll tax. In the early 19th century, Rhode Island was subject to a tuberculosis outbreak which led to public hysteria about vampirism. For the first several decades of statehood, Rhode Island was governed in accordance with the 1663 colonial charter. Voting rights were restricted to landowners holding at least $134 in property, disenfranchising well over half of the state's white male citizens. The charter apportioned legislative seats equally among the state's towns, overrepresenting rural areas and underrepresenting the growing industrial centers. Additionally, the charter disallowed landless citizens from filing civil suits without endorsement from a landowner. Bills to expand suffrage were periodically introduced in the legislature, but were invariably defeated. In 1841, activists led by Thomas W. Dorr organized an extra-legal convention to draft a state constitution, arguing that the charter government violated the guarantee clause in Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. In 1842, the charter government and Dorr's supporters held separate elections, and two rival governments claimed sovereignty over the state. Dorr's supporters led an armed rebellion against the charter government, and Dorr was arrested and imprisoned for treason against the state. Later that year, the legislature ultimately drafted a state constitution, removing property requirements for American-born citizens, but keeping them in place for immigrants, and retaining urban underrepresentation in the legislature. Civil War to Progressive Era, 1860 to 1929. During the American Civil War, Rhode Island was the first Union state to send troops in response to President Lincoln's request for help from the states. Rhode Island furnished 25,236 fighting men, of whom 1,685 died. On the home front, Rhode Island, along with the other northern states, used its industrial capacity to supply the Union Army with the materials it needed to win the war. The United States Naval Academy moved to Rhode Island temporarily during the war. In 1866, Rhode Island abolished racial segregation in the public schools throughout the state. During World War I, Rhode Island furnished 28,817 soldiers, of whom 612 died. After the war, the state was hit hard by the Spanish influenza. In the 1920s and 1930s, rural Rhode Island saw a surge in Ku Klux Klan membership, largely in reaction to large waves of immigrants moving to the state. The Klan is believed to be responsible for burning the Watchman Industrial School in Scituate, which was a school for African American children. Growth in the modern era. 1929 present. Since the Great Depression, the Rhode Island Democratic Party has dominated local politics. Rhode Island has comprehensive health insurance for low-income children, and a large social safety net. Many urban areas still have a high rate of children in poverty. Due to an influx of residents from Boston, increasing housing costs have resulted in more homeless in Rhode Island. The 350th anniversary of the founding of Rhode Island was celebrated with a free concert held on the tarmac of the Quonset State Airport on August 31, 1986. Performers included Chuck Berry, Tommy James and headliner Bob Hope. In 2003, a nightclub fire in West Warwick claimed 100 lives and resulted in nearly twice as many injured, and caught national attention. The fire resulted in criminal sentences. In March 2010, areas of the state received record flooding due to rising rivers from heavy rain. The first period of rainy weather in mid-March caused localized flooding, and 2 weeks later, more rain caused more widespread flooding in many towns, especially south of Providence. Rain totals on March 29-30, 2010 exceeded 14 inches in many locales, resulting in the inundation of area rivers, especially the Pawtuxet River which runs through central Rhode Island. The overflow of the Pawtuxet River, nearly 11 feet above flood stage, submerged a sewage plant and closed a 5-mile stretch of Interstate 95. In addition, it flooded 2 shopping malls, numerous businesses, and many homes in the towns of Warwick, West Warwick, Cranston, and Westerly. Amtrak service between New York and Boston was also suspended during this period. Following the flood, Rhode Island was in a state of emergency for 2 days. The Federal Emergency Management Agency was called in to help flood victims. Government. The capital of Rhode Island is Providence. The state's current governor is Gina Raimondo, and their lieutenant governor is Daniel McKee. Raimondo became Rhode Island's first woman governor with a plurality of the vote in the November 2014 state elections. Its United States Senators are Jack Reed and Sheldon Whitehouse. Rhode Island's 2 United States Representatives are David Cicilline and Jim Langevin. See Congressional Districts map. Rhode Island is one of a few states that do not have an official governor's residence. See List of Rhode Island governors. The state legislature is the Rhode Island General Assembly, consisting of the 75-member House of Representatives and the 38-member Senate. Both houses of the bicameral body are currently dominated by the Democratic Party. The presence of the Republican Party is almost non-existent in the state government, with Republicans holding a handful of seats in both the Senate and House of Representatives.